Welcome to my shop. I'm Earl, and for the last month I've been busy doing other things, hadn't had much turning time. A lot of things around the house that need to be done, stuff the wife wanted done, had to get done. But recently I put 3 pieces in a show at the Art Council, and talking to the ladies there, they decided they wanted to put on a show of just my pieces. So in December, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have a show, just my pieces. So consequently, I'm going to have to make a few more showcase pieces. So I'm going to be busy doing that. And I'm going to start off with one. I want to make a 48 segment per ring turning. And I made a new index wheel with 192 indexes, so I can make a 96 segment per ring if I want, or I can drop it down and do a 48. Of course, I can get other numbers out of it too. So what I'm going to do is just make a simple turning, just a small bowl shape. Originally, I wanted to make it 6 inch and put a solid bottom on it to keep it simple, but after I drew a couple of patterns, I decided on the second pattern I drew, which is, I think would be better if I started off with an 8 inch bottom, which means I'm going to have to put a floating bottom on it. Now I've got the material for the segments milled up here. They're both 0.3 inches thick. Now I didn't bother trimming this distance. There's no need to. They're all plenty wide to make the segments. If they're too wide, that's fine. I'll just turn them off later. What I did was just take the material and rip it off the edge. And this width here, just maintain it. Like I said, it's plenty wide. And there's no need cutting it down and throwing away a little piece. I'll just turn it off later. And that gives me enough material so I can have a little air one way or the other and don't have to worry about it. So this material's ready to go. Like I said, it's all been milled to 0.3 inches and all smooth sides. Now normally when I do an open segment, I'll put finish on the cut pieces, on the cut sides, before I put them on. Sand the other sides clean. But with these smaller pieces, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and cut them and put them on and not even worry about it. And I drew up a couple of patterns here. Of course, the colors don't exactly match the material, but you get the idea. I drew this one first, and if I make this, it'll end up being 21 rings tall. But then I decided I like this better. Of course, this color here is actually representing Purple Heart. It ain't real purple. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to end up with about 26 rings. So it's going to be take a little while to do it. And like I said, I'm going to get started with a floating bottom. Now, on this channel, of course, I have a video on how to make a floating bottom. So I'm not really going to go into that too much. And I think for the floating bottom, I might use Wenge. I got some Wenge that'll work fine. It'll give me a nice dark bottom. And on the top, I'll finish off the top probably with another dark material. And maybe I'll use some of this Macassar ebony. I've got some seconds. I've got a bunch of second pieces of Macassar ebony, and I can get plenty off for a top ring. Boards look kind of rough, and they are, but you can still get enough good material for segmenting use, although the boards ain't much value for anything else. So, like I said, I get seconds woods whenever I can for segmenting. It works out good. So, let me get some Wenge out, and we'll get started making a floating bottom. I took a stick of Wenge and cut off a strip, and I cut 24 segments from it. Now, because I'm using 48 segments per ring for the open segments, 24 will work because it's half of 48. So I'm using 24 for the floating base. Now, I cut 24 segments and prepared them by sanding. Now, I've got them dry clamped now just to make sure they fit tight before I glue them. Now, I'm going to use this to make the floating base. I'm going to split it, actually split off a piece and use it to cover the floating base. If you do not know how to make a floating base, on my channel, on this channel here, I have a video on one way to make a floating base. Of course, it's not the only way, but it's an easy way to make a floating base. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these up, and I'm going to flatten one side. I'm going to glue it to a piece of brown paper on a faceplate, and then I'll go ahead and turn it around, smooth the other side and flatten it to get a good glue surface, and I'm going to split it in half. Then I'm going to need a piece to actually put in the float for the floating base. In other words, the piece that'll be covering the center that'll be floating. And for that, I really wanted something that looks nice for this piece. And I have here, I got a piece of tamarind. It's a beautiful wood. And if you cut it into segments, you lose the beauty. You can't see it. But this would be perfect for the floating base. So what I did, I cut a piece off the end, flattened it, and then I resawed off a piece a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch thick, and I'm going to be using that to put in as a floating base. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and glue up this ring. I've got this ring mounted on brown paper on the faceplate. What I'm going to do now is turn this surface flat and sand it so I get a good glue surface. Then I'm going to part off about 1/3 and save it so I can put it back on the top of the floating bottom. So first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and smooth this up and part it off. I've got this piece parted off. It's got a good glue surface here, flat. Now, I'm going to flatten this up. Then I'm going to cut a rabbet in here, about 1/4 inch deep, probably about 3/8 wide, to hold the floating bottom I'm going to put in. But first I got to get a good glue surface here and then cut in the rabbet. And flatten, ready for glue. I've got the rabbet cut in here, and make sure that the bottom of it's square so that I can put in a floating bottom in it. Next thing I got to do now is to turn this piece to fit in there with a little gap all the way around the edge. I got this mounted to a very small chuck with hot melt glue. I've got it marked. I brought the tailstock up just to help hold it. Now I'm going to cut it round to the right size, I hope. Cut it a little bit wide and try it, and then shave it down a little bit at a time until I get it just where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it down. Okay, it's been turned to the diameter I want. It's been sanded, and finish has been put on it, all except for these 2 spots here where the blue tape is. This is where it's going to get glued in. I know it's called a floating bottom, but it's really a semi-floating bottom. It floats in this direction, which is of course the direction the wood moves. The grain runs in this direction, so you put a spot of glue here and here to glue it in. Now I'm going to take the tape off, put a little glue on it. I'm going to put the base piece back up here. I'm going to put this in the tailstock and bring them up and glue them together. Just make sure I got clearance all the way around, just enough for the wood to move. Okay, I got 2 spots of glue on it. I got it pushed in, and I'm going to leave it here overnight, I think, because it's getting late now, getting about dinner time. And I got a gap all the way around it, which leaves room for the wood to move. So, like I said, I'm just going to leave it here overnight. And tomorrow, I'll take the hot melt glue off very carefully so that I don't pull it loose. And then I'll turn this down to the same height as the outer ring here, and then I'll glue up the other ring over it. So we'll do that tomorrow. I pulled the small face plate off with the hot melt glue. Now this is glued on in just two little places. I've got to turn it down to the same height as this. It's a little bit proud now. And I'll put a slight dish in the center. Now after I turn it down to the same height, I'm going to sand it a little bit, trying to get it just a little bit smaller, maybe just a 10/1000th of an inch. And of course, I'm going to glue the piece I parted off back on it to hold it. Of course, with the glue just here, not on here, just glue here, a very light ring. Now I'll dry fit it before I actually glue it on one time. I'll dry fit it just to make sure. Then I'll take it off and I'll put finish on this piece. And then I'll put a very light layer of glue here, enough so I don't get squeezed out in this groove. So first thing I'm going to do is turn this down and sand it. Dry fitting it now. Make sure it fits up okay, fits tight. It looks good. I have turned it down, dished it a little bit in the center, turned this down, put the sanding stick on it. This one here, sanded it all down with a sanding stick. Then I sanded this piece and sanded this down just a little bit more right here and smoothed it out. So what I'm going to do now is put finish on this piece. I'm going to use shellac. It's fast drying, dry in just a couple of minutes. Then I'm going to put a real light coat of glue around here, and I'm going to bring the cover up. So it'll only be glued here. There won't be any glue on this piece, and I'll allow it to float in this direction. This direction right here, it can expand and contract. So I'm going to go ahead and put shellac on this and a light coat of glue, bring the bottom up and glue them together, and then let them sit. Okay, I've got the cover strip glued on now. The floating bottom is basically made. I'll just let it dry, and then I'll get on putting the next ring on. I think what I'm going to do is, where is it at? I got the floating bottom here, and I'm going to start putting the open segments, but I think before I do that I'm going to put a very thin light colored ring, either yellow heart or maple, right above the floating bottom. And of course I'll repeat it on the top too. So I think I'll make a light ring for that and put it on. What I'm going to do now is turn this down, taper it down to the floating bottom. Then I'm going to turn a flat area here to glue on the first ring. I'm going to put on a very thin light ring. So I'm just going to turn this down and then leave a flat area here and sand it flat and get it ready for it. This has been turned down. Now all floating bottoms will have a very small ridge right here unless you want to turn into the floating bottom itself. But it's been turned. This has been flattened, sanded. I got my light ring, which is actually pretty thick. I've got it turned and sanded, ready to glue. What I'm going to do is glue it on. After the glue dries, I'm going to flatten the other side. Only one side's been flattened now. I'll flatten the other side and sand it. Then I'll part it in two and turn it down to the thickness I want, which is going to be pretty thin. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue it up on there now. Okay, I've got plenty of glue on it now. So I'm going to put it in the tailstock. And I'm going to bring it up. Smear the glue around some. Make sure it's smeared around good. Make sure the joints are not lined up, that they're block laid. If I can even see the joints. See if I can see them. Here we go. Right there. Make sure they're block laid. Tighten her down a little. And I just let her dry for a while. It's been turned down about 1/8 of an inch. Turned flat and sanded smooth. I'm ready to put on the first row of open segments now. I've got the segments cut for the first ring, 48 of them. Now normally when I cut segments, I make them thicker than what I really need, and I put finish on the sides and then sand them down. But these are so small, I'm not going to do that. I just milled the stock to the height I need, which is 0.3 inches. Now, I cut the stock right off the edges of the board, which means that this direction, they're longer than what's really necessary. But I'm not going to bother trimming them down, just use them like they are. That way, I've got a little bit of material to work with, give me room for error. Fact is, if I need a 8 1/4 inch circle, I can make them 8 1/2 inch, and they're still plenty wide enough to do the job. So I'm going to just use them like they are. Now the first row is easy. It's just 2 woods, Peruvian walnut and yellow heart. You probably can't see it, but the first row here is just Peruvian walnut and yellow heart. And the way they're lined up is 6 and 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. So it'll be easy to put them on without making a mistake. Now when I get to the second row, it's going to be a lot harder. So, like I said, I got my new index wheel, which is commercially built. I finally found an index wheel that's got good indexes for segmented turning, open segmented turning. And I made a video that's on this channel just on that index wheel and where you can get one. So if you're interested, you can watch that video. So I'm going to start gluing these on. Alright, the same as before. Take the segment, a very light layer of glue, not much glue at all. Wow, it's hard to get a light layer on these little pieces. Then hold it on for 15 seconds. Now go on to the next one. Unlock it, turn it, and put it on the next index, which is right here. We'll get the next little piece and do the same thing. Wow, too much glue. Wow. Put it in, make sure it's down, hold it on for 15 seconds. Okay, unlock the index and go on to the next piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep putting them on. This new index wheel is great. These are lined up just perfect. That is super. But now, of course, they have to be sanded flat. Even though they're all exactly the same thickness and they're on a perfectly flat surface, I still have to sand them. So I'm going to sand them flat with a sanding board. Then I'll be ready to put on the next row. These have been setting for over 15 minutes, so they're good and dry. One here that's not quite flat yet. Gotta hit it again. Now that looks good, so I'm ready now to put on the next row. I've got the second row cut. I'm going to put it on at 8 3/4 inches. I've got them lined up the way they go on. I checked them, then I double checked them just to make sure that I got them right. Once they go on, if they're wrong, you got to take off the whole row. Now I just got to make sure I start them in the exactly right spot. I'm going to check that and then double check it too. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue on the second row the same way I did the first. I've got 4 rings on now. I'm going to start turning the inside, and just be careful I don't get up to the top ring. So I'll start turning on the first 3 rings on the inside. I've got 6 rows on now. Got the inside bottom starting to be turned. And with this new index wheel I'm using, which I made a video on my channel, these are going on perfect. Beautifully spaced, perfectly spaced. Nice, going on fast. So it won't be too long till I'll have all the rings on this. Of course it is a little slow like any open segment turning. But this is really great, this new index ring. I love it. So I'm going to go ahead, I got this one sanded, I'm going to go ahead and put some more rows on it now. I started off holding these on, clamping them for 15 seconds. But I got tired of that. And now I'm only clamping them for 10 seconds, and they're holding good. So the last few rings have all been just clamped for 10 seconds. They're just about as fast as I can put glue on them. I can glue them on. Now I'm going to hold this for 10 seconds. Done. Just that quick and easy now. I'm at the halfway point now. I got the halfway ring on. I've got one full pattern on, and I'm getting ready to put the second one on. I'm also at the widest spot, and I'm going to start bringing it back down again now. And I've got it turned about, maybe 3/4 of the way up the inside here. So I'm turning as I go out. Careful not to get too close to the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting on the next ring now. And like I said, it's starting to taper back in now. I am ready to let me start again. I'm ready to glue the last ring on now. I've got it turned and sanded about 2/3 of the way up, maybe 3/4. But anyway, the inside's been turned and sanded quite a ways up. And I'm getting ready now to put on the last ring. And when I started, I was putting glue on the pieces and holding them for 15 seconds. Well, I've got it down the last 20 rings or so. I've been holding them for 10 seconds is all. I haven't had a bit of problem with that. They're glued on good. So let's do one here. Can't even use my timer anymore because it's set for 15 seconds. Put a little glue on one of these. That's enough. Just 10 seconds. That's all I'm doing them. And they're holding. They're gluing good. Let me just put another one on. Real quick here. It's way too much glue. Glue them on faster than I can put glue on the pieces, really. Here we go. Not yet. Get in there. Nope. Put it in the right index hole. Let them do better. There we go. That's it. It's on there. So I'm going to go ahead and glue all the rest of this ring on. Then I'll be ready to sand it off and put the solid rings on the top. I've got all the open segments on it now. And what I like to do on large open segment turnings, just the larger ones, is I like to put a strong ring on the top, or rings, and I like to use a hardwood. And if I'm only putting one ring on the top, I'll actually split it and make it 2 rings. I always like to have 2 rings on the top of them, because that way I get long grain glue up across the joints. It gives it strength. Like this. When you bricklay it, you get the long grain glue ups across the joint, and it gives it a lot more strength. So if I just put one ring on it, I'll actually split it and make it 2. But in this case, I got a trim ring to go on that. Same trim ring that I parted off the bottom, I got to put it back, put the piece I parted off back on the top. And even though it's a thin trim ring, it'll still give me that long grain glue up across the joints. Now, on this turning, I want a dark wood. So the bottom's got wenge. I can put wenge on the top, but it's kind of coarse grained. I really don't want it on the top. I got some catalogs. I can put catalogs on it, but it's kind of a really reddish brown. That's not what I'm looking for. I got some Macassar ebony. Even though it's a seconds wood, it's still expensive. I don't want to put that expensive wood on this turning. This turning ain't all that great. I'm going to save it. So what I got's a piece of seconds wood. I have no idea what it is I got. It's heavy. It's real heavy. Hard as a rock. You can hear it. It's really hard. And I was wondering how dark it was. I splashed some shellac on it and it come up with a pretty dark color. So I think I'm going to cut a piece of this. Like I said, I don't know what it is. It's got some tiny knots in it, a whole bunch of tiny little knots in it. So, but they're tight, so it should be okay. If it's not, I can always part it off and put something else on. But I'm going to try this and see how it works out. So it's going to have a piece of mystery wood on it. If anybody knows what it is, you can maybe tell me. It's got these little tiny knots in it. Like I said, it's hard and heavy. So, really don't know what it is, but I'm going to make a ring out of that and try it. So the first thing I've got to do, of course, is put this trim ring back on and then turn it down to 1/8 of an inch. Then I'll be ready to put the hard dark ring on the top of that. So I'm going. Now normally I'd put a little bit of glue on each segment, just a light layer on each segment, and put the trim ring in the tailstock and bring it up. And not spin it around, just bring it up with the joints right over the top of the segment. But with 48 of them, I don't know if I want to do that or not. I think what I'm going to do is put a real light layer on the trim ring. I'll use a brush and get a light, even layer on the trim ring, and then just bring it up. I don't want a heavy layer. But I do want an even layer. Okay. What do I see here? Yeah. Let's bring her up and put her on. Now get the joint right over the top of the segment. Okay. Well, I hope that's got it. We'll let her sit. See, the nice thing about using seconds woods is it's cheap. The bad thing about using seconds woods is it's always got defects in it. In this case, I cut about 34 segments, get 24 good ones. I got some like this. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a good sized crack in this. So using second wood, you inspect each piece. But I got 24 now. And I got them dry clamped. And they fit nice. I'm going to glue them up into the ring. Then I'll smooth this ring out and we'll be ready to go with it. Meantime, my trim ring is glued on. It's been there for about an hour. I had to go in the house for a while. Now I got to turn it down to the same thickness as the one on the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch thick. Luckily they're far enough apart you can't tell if they're a little bit different. So I got to turn it down and smooth it, and I got to smooth this and glue it on. And when I turn it down, I'm going to finish turning the inside of the open segments. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this up and turn them down. Okay, the trim ring has been turned down, sanded flat. All the open segments have been turned on the inside and sanded up to 400 grit. This ring's been turned flat and sanded. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this ring on now. And that's the last ring to go on. Just put some glue on it. Now that's enough, that's plenty. Better put some wax paper under here to protect my blade from dripping glue. Go ahead and glue this on. And we'll let her dry, and I'll be ready to finish turning the inside and the top. Now let's spread the glue around a little bit. Make sure it gets good. Oh yeah, it gets good and spread around. Now I'll get the joints in the right spot so that we get brick-laid joints. Tighten her down a little bit. We'll just let her sit for a while. Then I'll be ready to finish turning the inside, turn the top. After that, I'm going to put it between centers, do the outside. The glue's dried enough that I can start turning this. I'm going to finish turning right here on the inside. Like I said, all the open segments have been turned and sanded. I'm going to turn the top two rings. I'm going to sand it. Now I'm going to put finish on the inside and on the top rings. Then I'm going to put it between centers before I do the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn it a little bit and sand it and finish it. Okay, I've got this all turned, got sanded and finish put on it. I'm going to let it set a while. Let the finish harden some. Now I'm going to tape it with blue painter's tape. And I'm going to bring the cone up on the tailstock like this and print it between centers. So I'm just going to let the finish harden some first, and then I'll bring the cone up and I'll turn the outside. I got the center cone up now on it. Not real tight, just enough to hold it. I don't want a lot of pressure on it. Just enough to stabilize it so I can turn between centers now. Makes it a lot easier to turn. I'm going to go ahead and turn the outside down now. Well, I got it turned, sanded, and finish put on it. All I have to do now is take it off the faceplate, which is easy. I got it mounted on brown paper. Just start the paper tearing. Use this tool and just start the paper tearing, and it comes right off. Then I'm going to reverse it on cold jaws. I got to finish turning the bottom and I'll be done. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off the faceplate and then reverse it on the cold jaws. I'm ready to turn the bottom now. I've got it on the cold jaws, holding it from the inside because it tapers in. I got the tapered pins on it. Got the tailstock up, but not real tight. This ain't real strong in the bottom. But it's enough. If it comes loose, it'll hold it from falling off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the bottom here. Shouldn't take much, just a little bit. Get the paper off and smooth down this edge. That's about it. Taper it here so we got a ring for it to sit on without rocking. Well, there we have it, off the lathe. So you can see how I do 48 segments and how I use that new indexing wheel. And this didn't turn out as good as I hoped it would. The fact is, it's not really good at all, but it is something different. I will say that. I don't really like it too much, but it is what it is, I guess. So, it's got a floating bottom, 48 segments per ring. I got a hard wood ring on the top. In this case, it's mystery wood. You know, a lot of people have asked me why I never show any turning. Well, there's a real good reason. If a person knows how to turn, watching somebody turn on a video is just boring, just plain boring. If they don't know how to turn, I don't really think watching YouTube videos is a way to go. There's a whole lot of people on the YouTube videos turning. There's a lot of them that are good turners. There's some that are excellent turners. There's a lot of them that are not so good at turners. And there's quite a few that really scare me when I watch them. So if somebody wants to learn to turn, my best advice is to go to the AAW site, American Association of Woodturners, and they've got a list of all the clubs, and then go to a local club, and you go to a local club, the people there are more than happy to help you. And one-on-one, I believe, is really the way to learn to turn. So, besides that, I don't use a gouge. People say, well, you know, a gouge takes wood off faster. True, but I don't take off that much wood. And no matter how good you are with a gouge, everybody at some time or another will get a catch. And when I spend as much time as I did building something like this, I'm not going to get a catch. That's just the way it is. So I don't use gouges. I use what I call an Olin tool. Once in a while I'll use a carbide tool. And like I said, I don't take off that much wood, so it works out pretty good. Anyway, that's it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a little something. And I appreciate everybody that watches. And I really appreciate everybody that subscribes. And come back and see my next video. I'm going to be doing something different next time. And I hope it's a little better than this. This ain't all that good. So, thank you.